Greetings, everybody, and welcome to our April 12th TED Talks Discussion Club, hosted by Clifford Blizzard and myself, Mark Nitka. We run these every Wednesday, the second Wednesday. Not every Wednesday, every second Wednesday of the month. And we have rotating topics, and the topic and theme for this month is environmental sustainability. And we're going to start it off with a video that Clifford picked. And I'm going to stop the recording while I'm sharing the video. Feel free. I'm going to also post the link. You can watch on your own computer using the link, or you can watch the stream. But sometimes Zoom stream is a little choppier with video. But yeah, and feel free to comment in the chat as you're watching if you have thoughts. This is the first talk. Oh, that did not work. Copy. And it's the talk is titled "Everybody Can Be a Sustainability Leader" by Annick Schmeddes, I believe is how it's pronounced. I'll post that also in the chat. So if you're watching the recording, make sure to click on the link in the description and watch that before coming back for the discussion. All right, we're going to start the video. All right, welcome back. I'm just catching up on the chat. What did everybody think of that presentation? Is anybody currently in your current role or in a past role at a company or organization working in a sustainability related committee or team or project? But I also see Catherine, did you have a comment?
I'm not, but I'm in my first honors class and I have my service to do, which is a little overwhelming because I chose nutrition. I'm very passionate about it. And also, as I'm coming in, I'm thinking, how do I do this in like a week and a half and get something going? But then I look at doing additional PLA credits to amass it to more like a 30-day trial or a session, because in a way it is sustainability when you look at what we utilize every day. And her talk was interesting because I don't know if there was a specific focus outside of being a leader in sustainability. And that's important to me. I'm sitting here messaging with a girl from work, and she's like, I want to know what you're doing. So it's just trying to think, how can I be a leader in that aspect when, I'm not doing anything for work. I work in technology. There's not really, a whole lot I can do there, but what can I do personally to impact my friends, my family, and how does that impact beyond that? How can I have them impact 2 or 3 people and then go forward and go forward?
Definitely. Thank you for sharing. I would challenge you that almost every business, every company, and I don't know if you maybe work remotely, so if you're not like in the physical location, but every type of business and company makes a lot of choices. And I think, whatever field they're in terms of facilities, all of their, utilities, HVAC, how they're getting their electricity, what kinds of conservation measures they have. I think there's a lot of ways that every company or organization could probably work towards being more environmentally sustainable. But and I think different organizations, and I've heard from some of my students in various classes that they're on like a environmental working group within their company to like identify and try to come up with plans and strategies to making things more environmentally sustainable at their company. But yeah, thank you for sharing, Catherine. Did you have another follow-up?
Oh, no, I don't even know, honestly, what my company does sustainability besides they do like community events. But I am a remote employee and, work from home. So it's really looking at how can I impact my community. But you bring up a good point to really dive in further within my company to find out what they do work on for sure.
Yeah.
So a lot of comments in chat here. Charles says, I try to find ways to contribute to sustainability by recycling, limiting car use. At my job as an Army musician, I try to fix equipment so we don't have to buy excess that we may not need. Those are great examples. At my current job, Ben Wells says we are deploying a new printing system with the purpose of reducing the use of paper across the organization. That's a huge one. A lot of companies still are Byzantine in their amount of paper that they're still burning through, and that's what I would call low-hanging fruit. Those are the kinds of things that are going to ultimately save the company a lot too. They get stuck in patterns. And I think identifying those patterns and helping them get unstuck might actually get you attention, because a lot of those things are going to save the company a lot of money. So those, obviously others, just getting people where at the company, everyone to recycle, that can be huge. Maybe it won't have the same impact on the bottom line for the corporation, but it can be huge as well. My company does a lot for the community. Angela says we have volunteer opportunities at Cal Parks to do cleanups. Fantastic. My current job, Christian says, we're a cold storage facility, so energy sustainability absolutely would be a big focus there. So it does differ from corporation to corporation, the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of needs. But a lot of the time, it really comes down to also saving money and the image of the company as a result. Angela says they're also encouraging us to bank sustainability. Fantastic. So and Catherine asked what that term is. Yeah, Byzantine, I do too, Charles. I have to bring that in. And attempting to transfer all electronic file systems via paper. That's great. Job shreds and recycles, Shelley says, paper cans, etc., and use the money to donate to the shelters. Another great thing you can do with a shredder, by the way, is you can start composting. You can use it as it works wonderfully for compost bin. If you want to have one at work, you can use the shredded paper to layer in the bin, and that's there's lots of great uses for shredded paper. My job also uses water to cool and heat our buildings, Shelley says. So I'll stop there. I heard someone wanting to chime in.
Yeah, that might have been me. I don't know, do you want video on or?
Doesn't matter. You do what you want.
Okay. I just jumped off the step mill at the gym. So I work for an oil and gas industry. I've pretty much lived back history. My family's about 4 or 5 generations in on this work, and hearing the way the industry's gone over the years, obviously there's a big boom in oil. It's pretty messy there for a while. Understand the environmental impacts. There's been a lot of mistakes, lessons learned. Technology has definitely evolved over time, right? Safety, so when you mention sustainability, I mean, the sustainability is everyone, economic, lifestyle, ethics, morals, I mean, mental health. I mean, there's a ton of stuff. I'm not sure how many people in here work construction, but again, like, I'm pretty sure she might have been referring to environmental. I think that's the subject here, but there's an environmental impact on everything. And, it depends on the economy too, right? So we associate everything with the American government, and I'm not trying to turn this into politics, but at what cost? So I know the company I work for, the investment that they make is huge. But at the same time, as much as they invest, as much as the technology has improved, everything costs money. Like, we can't, 60 years ago, they laid pipelines across America without any restraints. And now it's almost impossible to just gain access to your own property, your own right of way, because of the environmental restraints. So if you can't get out there and fix this stuff, or you can't go update these systems because you got to wait 6 months for a permit, a year, whatever the case may be. The Indians got reservation lands. They want $5 million for you to even set foot on it. So what do you do? So I kind of feel I'm gonna play a little bit of devil's advocate here on this one. And as much as I am pro change, pro environmental, pro safety, again, this is my lifestyle. I preach it. But what are we talking here? You know, so, you know, recycling a little bit, yeah, it adds up. We do it here on every project. It's mandatory. But anyways, I just want to throw that out there. I just not trying to change the subject, but I do want to express it. Nobody's making it easy to be sustainable, whether the impacts are small or large. And then who is actually benefiting from it? Like she talked about, you know, who's involved in these things and starting out as program managers and whatnot. A lot of times that's nepotism. Those positions are for people that are moving from management into executive positions. It's not for your average person. Again, not trying to point anybody out, but a lot of times those positions are fulfilled by who? You know, is it really somebody that actually cares, or is it somebody that's using it for a step down in their career? You know, and so that, anyways, all right, done. Soapbox off.
Well,
You make a point, though. You really do.
I guess my immediate thought is that we, in 207, students calculate their ecological footprints. And we all, myself included, have footprints over one Earth, which means that everyone, and by everyone, I mean corporations, I mean all entities, we're all culpable, right? So what does it mean to be sustainable? I would say, Donald, number one, we need to collectively get below one Earth because we only have one Earth. And the only reason we're getting away with it in America, we're getting people in parts of Europe are getting away with it, people in Japan are getting away with it, is because if you visit India and you visit the slums of Rio, people there are using a lot less than one Earth. The vast majority, most all of Africa, the vast majority where the cobalt's being mined by children, which we talked about a few months ago, the cobalt that admittedly is going has been going into some of our batteries for our electric cars, right? So talk about everybody's culpable, you know, but the reality is, what does sustainability look like? Bringing that below one collectively. And that is going to require a major change in the way all of us, myself included, think about stuff, think about the travel we do, overseas. I mean, I've taken plenty of overseas trips. I'm guilty of that too. And that's an immense toll from a greenhouse gas perspective. So it's going to take a huge, just a second, let me finish this thought. It's going to take a huge consciousness change and a huge shift in for all of us to do that. It's big, it's massive. So yes, governments to some extent are culpable too of standing in the way of getting the kinds of big, massive changes that we need, and very rapidly too. I mean, some of these changes need to occur very quickly and very soon if we're not to see tremendous environmental impacts. I just joined my last thought, and I'll stop. I'm just joined an upcoming course that's going to be offered on resilience. The course is called Resilience, and let me see if I can get the name here of this course. It's basically resilience in an age of collapse, because that's the and there's resilience and acceptance in the face of collapse, and that is a realistic picture of what we're facing now. So anyway, you know, it's going to take a lot from a lot of people.
Right, we're not under a one world order, right? And I know Asheen mentioned the 2010 comment with Mark. You know, so again, every state doesn't have the same rules and applications. Every company doesn't uphold the same quality. So, you know, and I understand, like, if they're having leaks with welding, so you're talking about 1104 code, well, that's straight across the board. Now, if it's not being enforced, if it's not being upheld, then who's accountable? Obviously, the company is, or the contractor does the work. But then again, every state has their own rules. It's not straight across the board in the federal government. It may seem that way, but it's not consistent. And you know, the company I work for, they claim to be, you know, leading, and I believe them. I've worked for pretty much every oil company in California over some point in time, and I tell you what, there's a huge difference. And that's why I went from being a contractor to a company employee, because I needed to be able to sustain myself. It's frustrating when you're trying to uphold the good, and it's just not the same everywhere you go, right? So it's not consistent. But again, we're relating, most of us probably relating to what we got going on in our own practices locally or within our own government, in our own America. But you jump overseas, you go to Arabia, you go to Mexico. I mean, why is there so many industries coming out of America and going to overseas? Well, obviously it's more affordable, but at the same time, they can get away with a lot more, so at what cost, right? So if you kept those companies here in town, kept them here local, and then made them apply to these standards, I'm not sure how they can enforce it. I mean, like you mentioned, so the last deal, like we've seen what Starbucks in one of our studies in our classes, what they went around to try to level that out with the farmers and make their quality of life better. That's what we're talking about. Now we're talking about the quality of earth. So who's going to hold everybody accountable? How do you hold other people accountable if they're not part of the system, right? So, yeah, appreciate the time.
Appreciate the thoughts. Others, please join in. I've talked too much. I see Mark has a long comment here. I'll let him read it if you'd like. Charles, you mentioned cobalt and lithium for EVs, and yes, we're changing. Things are changing in that direction too. I don't want to leave with a sense that these issues people aren't aware of them and taking action on them, which is wonderful. But it's a wicked achieving sustainability is a wicked problem. Those of you that have taken 270, it is a very wicked problem. It is and to your point, Donald, it does wrap up with all these other kinds of sustainability, economic sustainability, whatever. And and how do those workers out there struggling to stay alive, how can they even think about sustainability? They're going to think about what's immediately necessary for them, their own sustainability, first and foremost. I talked with someone in Bangladesh many years ago. I wasn't in Bangladesh, but he was a student at Colorado State, and he lived in Dhaka, the capital city. And I asked him what life was like there, and he said, you live from disaster to disaster. A disaster happens, you respond to it, you deal with it, you go to your nearest emergency shelter when the city floods, and then it goes down, and you kind of breathe a sigh of relief, and you go back to your work until the next disaster. And how do you, in those kinds of conditions, and this is worsening, of course, with climate change, we're looking at more severe storms, sea level rise. Bangladesh is virtually underwater already. How do you, what do you do? How do you live sustainably under those conditions? Anyway, yes.
Well, I think it marks when I look at, for instance, nutrition for my, honors 270 course. I mean, that's passionate for me because I look at people around me. How do they eat? How do they do things? And that goes into sustainability. But then I look at what's our future? It's our children. So how do we as individuals guide our children towards sustainability with all the pressures from outside? I know I have a 16-year-old stepson who does nothing but suck down highly processed foods. And it's hard to change because that's all he wants. But then I have a 3-year-old who's like, I want to eat healthy. I like to eat healthy, mommy. But then how do you take that and then take it to a bigger group? Because that's what's going to change not only today, but in the future. Because if you look at it, how are we going to feed our future in 10 years, 20 years? Because our population continues to grow, and exponentially at that. I mean, look on social media, everyone's having babies. And how are we going to feed them? How are countries that are not first world countries who take food for granted going to have that nutrition, those basic balances that we have at our disposal? And it's mind-blowing because there's, like you said, a wicked problem. There's really no solution to a wicked problem because there might be so many solutions, but one solution for one country may not fit for another country because of where it comes from and what their revenue is, what their funding is, what their government is, et cetera. And there's so many things that come into play. How do you balance that? Like, how do you get leadership to work together instead of, fighting against each other? And that's the frustrating part in trying to teach our children, like, rather than fighting, how do we work together and accept each other, our backgrounds, our differences, and say, you know what, that doesn't matter because what's important is our future. Okay, I'm done. Anyone can talk.
Those are awesome points. Those are awesome. I see Shelley has her hand raised. I'll just share one thing. I think I propose by doing together, whether it's by establishing a community garden, that's a great one. where people are all working together toward a goal that's towards their own health and well-being. And you get intergenerational learning happening out there, where hopefully there's grandparents and grandchildren working together and doing these things. So you get out and you do little things, start sprouting in your home, things like that are nourishing and that are wholesome. And then you kind of spread the word about that. And then you notice that your food bill went down this month. Wow, I'm spending less money. And this last time I went to the dentist, you didn't have any cavities from the products you were eating before. And you start to notice the benefits, but it's a tough battle. Shelley, you have your hand raised patiently there. Did you want to speak or just type into chat?
I'm sorry, can you hear me now?
Absolutely.
Okay, I'm sorry. So what I do, I have young children, and what I do is that I have family meetings, and in that meeting, it is hard to teach our kids not to fight because they see it on TV. Our leaders are fighting today. And so, but I started with my children by discussing things like that. Also, little things for them, like he said, the gardening, we have that at school. And also what helped from them was just reducing our footprint, right? It was really easy for me to create little bins and see like who had the less, and we would weigh it, and, and we would like encourage each other who could not buy it and who's putting less in their bins and things like that. And we just started there. And then my kids start teaching me. They start, researching things and coming home, and they're like, well, mommy this and mommy that. So we all have learned from each other, right? And even though they're 11, I have a 23 and 19-year-old. So it really helps. And then it just brought the family unity also.
I love that. Yeah.
We should probably run the next video. It's a little shorter, but I still want us to have maybe 10 or so minutes to discuss that one. So I'm going to pause the recording. I'm putting the video information into the chat. It is called The Sustainable Brilliance of Indigenous Design by Manu, Peni. And yes, I'm going to pause recording. So as there was some talk of going back to the 1800s in the chat, and I think that it's I think it's important to balance and to have perspective that takes into account both traditional indigenous knowledge and modern understanding. And sometimes those two things come together as we don't understand something, and then we study the phenomenon more and we understand it better. But I think that the future will hopefully be a better place if we take into account old traditional indigenous knowledge and modern science, and how those can both teach us what might be some,
There was an example in the news, Mark, just a few weeks ago, a case where in the outback of Australia, there's an area where there are these growths of vegetation that they look like perfect circular islands separated from each other. And scientists have come up, had their own explanation for why that was going on. It was about interspecies competition among the plants, and it was causing a certain distance and all. And the Aboriginal people said, in their traditional dreaming stories, the termites inhabit. There are termites that inhabit these particular patches where these plants are. And lo and behold, the Aboriginal explanation is the correct one. That's what's going on there. They had that knowledge. They had that particular perspective. And this is a subject, forgive me for diving in, so I want students to have a chance to speak. But this is a subject near and dear to me, because in time and again, I've had a lot of courses and done a lot of reading in this area. Time and again, the indigenous understanding of our relationship to the environment is a lot closer by far to what ecologists are now saying about the way that things work than our traditional Western model by a long shot. I mean, the way, and they had that intuitive knowledge, the kind of understanding that ecologists and other scientists are realizing now they've had for thousands and thousands of years. They've lived with that understanding of how things work. Shelley, I noticed your hand's raised, or is your hand still raised from before? I'm not sure. Anyone else like to share as well about thoughts about that? That was a great video, Mark.
I had something. Does my mic work?
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So I wanted to connect this to the previous video too, because we ended that conversation with how do we teach our kids sustainability. And I have two, I got a 3-month-old that might start screaming in the middle of this soliloquy. So I'm going to try and make it work before that happens. But I just wanted to say that something that mentioned in the second video was cultural heritage. And that can be part of how you teach kids sustainability. And then I wanted to take it a step further and in the information age go from the argument of micro versus macro, where we're worried about getting a lot of clicks on Facebook, it feels like, at least I do because I'm a journalism major, but looking at the world, like there is something to be said for, I think, grassroots. So Catherine, I believe you were talking about like, how do I teach my child? Just teach one. You teach one and then they teach another, and it becomes a multiplication problem, and that's how movements begin. So in the information age, I really think that we might be losing the micro element of things, of personal interaction that really can solve, well, not solve problems. I don't want to say solve a wicked problem with too many prongs, but that can be a real way to solve some of these issues. And that's also, I think that moves between different governments, because I know that the country's debate came up soon. So, all right, I'm gonna go mute because it looks like somebody is awake.
Thank you, Charles. Does anybody else have any thoughts they'd like to share?
He made a point of stop thinking of us as underdeveloped. And at the beginning, he had stated that he went abroad to study and then went back to his, homeland. And you see that quite often where they go to different countries that have very good education programs. And then they say, okay, I want to go back home and make a difference. And they do, and phenomenally so, by so many peer-reviewed articles that I read through writing papers, et cetera. And it's not what's happening in our country, it's what's happening in other countries. Because disrespect to the United States, but we take so much for granted because it's so easily accessible for us. But then in other countries that may not have all of the liberties that we do, they have to work harder for it. So he made a good point that we do need to stop thinking of countries that do not have the same resources that we do as underdeveloped, because they have, I think, in many ways have so much more to teach us about just in general. Like you look at how about sustainability, they've been doing this with different ecological systems than what we have. Like I live in Ohio and we have all 4 seasons. So we have rain, snow, all of that comes all the time. So they may have no rain or snow and they're still figuring it out. So it's really how do we learn from them versus them learning from us?
I posted a link to a video in chat. Those of you that have been in my honors classes, maybe you've already seen it, but it speaks really well to Charles's point. Catherine, your point's awesome too. Forgive me, I'm jumping back a little bit. But to Charles's point, it talks about at what levels are we most effective, and we're most effective at the level of reaching others near us, and at the level of action in our immediate communities. And yet we learn a lot about taking action on the national level and the international level. There's these problems, but in the reality, where we can leverage the most impact by far at these other levels. This first level is the self, but the argument is that the next 2 levels that are the key. It's a brief video and absolutely worth watching. It just changed my perceptions really, really much about feeling like, oh, there's these national issues, I need to be doing more about them. Well, if you want to be really effective, be effective with family, friends, where you work, and then the community you live in. Those are the 2 scales where you can have the largest impact. But yeah, these learning from these indigenous cultures, if I can jump and mentally nimble here. It's late at night, I'm not sure I can, but learning from these indigenous cultures, there's so much about the way the way about that they've learned about living sustainably, and it is wrapped up in such a different worldview, such a different mindset about, these are cultures for whom the whole earth is alive, that essentially there's presence, there's living presence, and therefore to be respected. And we're starting to see countries that are actually adopting that. Ecuador, Bolivia, and New Zealand are beginning to give personhood to rivers, to natural areas, and say, when we make decisions, we need to treat these entities like they are persons, not objects, that they're subjects. Because unfortunately, I think the big mindset problem we have in the West is that we've objectified everything other than human. They're all objects to be manipulated. They're raw materials, right? And if we think of them as subjects that are also conscious and present in the world around us, that shift, I think that's a key shift on the path to sustainability, by the way, as well, because we're going to lose them all. We're going to wipe them all out if we continue to subjectify them the way we are. But objectify them the way we are, rather than treating them as subject. So, and also, happiness. Mark, you talk about Bhutan. The happiest groups of people in the world tend to be the ones, actually, the children in slums are happier by and large than American children. It isn't having things that brings happiness, and Bhutan is using happiness as a way of thinking about its goal as a nation, rather than per capita money, rather than per capita economic measures. So anyway, wow, we could launch this a whole other 5 hours here, and there's some great comments in chat. So
I can attest to that. 3-year-old, and I know that Charles has just a couple month-year-old baby. And I will tell you, you can shower your child with tons of toys and they just don't care. They want a box or a pan, and that's all they play with. And it is really I think us learning of how we can simplify their lives, because the more simplistic our lives are, the happier we are. We look at, my husband and I had this 30-day challenge, and we're redoing it for a huge ass garage sale to get rid of all of our crap. But it's the less we have, the happier we are, because what we're doing is getting rid of material items and doing what makes us happy, which is expanding our garden, expanding our chicken run to make our chickens more happy. And, that's what's more important for sustainability for our family, and then sharing with our neighbors, our friends, etc. I know when we were out last weekend, our neighbors across the street, their son is the same age as our daughter, and he's just like, Mom, we need to go check those chickens and make sure they're okay. Just that they would never have known that if we didn't do that first. And now that's something they love to do. So it's something they talk about with their friends and family. So I think the more that we can do individually to make a difference and make a change will make a bigger impact in the long run. And maybe it's thinking small, but I'm not sure how to do it another way without impacting on an individual basis, because I think that makes a bigger presence in how we feel and act on an everyday basis, and really can change another person, and then they change another person.
Macro v micro.
Mm-hmm.
I could do that argument for just about anything, just because I go real simple with it. But I recognize the box thing, because that happened, I think, a day ago. And my children love toys from the dollar store. I'm fine with that. So that's the long and the short of it. Macro v micro for the win.
Buy a bunch of refurbished Hot Wheels. My daughter's 3 and she loves Hot Wheels. We'll fill up and full of Hot Wheels and carry them around. So yeah, it's interesting watching them, because they're simplistic and they get such joy out of simple things. I look at my daughter outside pulling grass and just feeding it to the chickens. Here's some gorgeous grass chickens, is what she said yesterday. And it's just funny, because if we learn from them, think of the difference we can actually make even more. through friends and peers.
And cultivating that love of simplicity, I think, makes the future generation better than we are, which I think is the ultimate goal. So I want my children to be better than me.
Yeah, those are all excellent points, and we are a few minutes past. So thank you everybody who shared. Thank you everybody who came today and contributed and watched these videos and thought about them and discussed them with us. I'm going to post the Qualtrics link. And if you're in the honors program, make sure to track on your own sheet and also the Qualtrics survey. Clifford, did you have any other things to add before we adjourn?
And if you have any, this has been a fantastic hour. I'm just like, it's like frustrating. It's like an hour is such a short span of time. It's, and that's why I appreciate that here, because I had plenty of hours that go long, and this is not one of them. This is the shortest hour. I think time just sped up. But I've really enjoyed talking to all of you. I've enjoyed the different perspectives you've shared. It's been awesome. The other thing, I'm going to put a word out. Some of you shared some really great insights that could be the seeds for leading your own TED Talk discussion. We already have a student that's done that. You can be next. And that's for 3 hours toward your 15 to do that. We will set up a special event for that. We will MC it for you. We'll manage it behind the scenes, so it's not terribly stressful. I met with the other student and gave her a few coaching tips. We're happy to do that too. We'd love to do that. Our long-term goal is for the PLA credit to be about leadership and about you guys, not about us. So, is there a question?
No, but I have a question if we stay on after, once everyone is done about that. So, yeah.
Sure. And I'm happy to stay after here to answer questions about, and if you have any questions about honors in general as well, that's where we can talk about that too. And yeah, I can answer any questions you have.